and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Music to my ears, my friends, every time I hear that intro music play. Welcome to the program, my friends. Good morning. From very high above all the puerile and insipid and bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. My friends, it has been an interesting session. We've got 2 more weeks left in the legislative session, and every time you get to the final couple of weeks, final few days, things start to heat up a little bit. There's all the tension surrounding if the governor is going to sign this or if the governor is going to veto that. And there's all sorts of backroom dealing and maneuvering that's going on because you have to reconcile bills from either side of the Capitol. You know, typically the Senate tends to spend, and this year anyway, the Senate tends to spend more money than the House. The Senate has been watering down House bills. There's a number of examples of that. And the House, and Senate File 69 is an interesting example because it's actually the opposite. The House of Representatives wants to add a backfill to the tax relief bill. That's something that the Senate has said they are fundamentally against. Now, I think it's for political reasons that they're doing that, but nonetheless, this morning they are in conference committee talking about it. So the 2 competing bills, and I've told you about this before on the program, but the 2 competing bills are the Senate's version, which is a 50% tax cut across the board with no consideration for local governments. And I've gone over and over the reasoning behind that there are members of the Senate that just think that taxpayers need to be punished, that we'll make you feel how bad this is. That way you'll never ask for a tax cut again. Now, of course, they don't come out and they're never honest about it. But that's the motivation behind it. I mean, you would only, words mean things. And for example,
2 plus 2 is 4, not 5 if you want it to be 5. And this is not to be discriminatory. This is to stand up for language. Words mean things.
Words mean things, and your word choice is very important. And so when your name is Senator Slithers and you say they have to understand the consequences of tax cuts, we should take that to mean that Senator Slithers wants you to feel the pain and so that you don't ever ask for a tax cut again. Now, on the other side of the Capitol building, very different bill. So this one is a 50% tax cut, but it has a 50% backfill. So in essence, it's a 25% backfill to your counties and towns. And then there's a couple of cool provisions in it, I think, that if the People's Initiative passes, then that bill will sunset. And if not, it will continue into perpetuity. And I think there's, I can't remember how long the backfill is going to last on that. But in any case, there's 2 different versions of the bill. And in my opinion, it was the House of Representatives that flipped the middle finger to the Senate after they decided, we're not going to be pushed around. And we're not really going to do whatever the Senate says. Rightfully so, by the way. We have a bicameral legislature for a reason, and they both operate pretty well independently. There's the drama concerning Senate File 40, which I've talked about several times on the program. By the way, yeah, if you missed yesterday's edition of the podcast, you should really go back and listen to it. I proved to you that what Representative Liz Storr was saying on the floor of the House of Representatives was an out and out lie. Imagine that. Democrats lying. I know. I actually, you know what? I can't wait until this whole process plays out because, this one, above all others, has got some backroom dealing going on, and there's maneuvering on either side. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. Other updates yesterday, the governor, Go Green Gordon, allowed the Gold Act to go into law without his signature. That one's amazing because the versions of the Wyoming Gold Act have been attempted several times in recent years. Last year was the one where we got all the great sound bites from the floor that the dollar is more stable than gold and all of those crazy things. But the governor allowed it to go into law. So now the state of Wyoming is going to hold precious metals. I think that's an incredible development. And I think it's great for the state of Wyoming. It's important that even though we have a $30 billion sovereign wealth fund, that we're able to hedge that wealth fund against inflation. And the only real way to do that is to hold precious metals. There's a lot of other states that have been buying tremendous amounts of gold. Texas asked the Federal Reserve to return all of their gold. So a lot of different states are thinking along these same lines, and I'm glad that Wyoming is finally on that bandwagon. Other interesting news in the Senate, in the House Corporations Committee, I can't even talk this morning, House Appropriations Committee this morning. They're going to listen to the Second Amendment Protection Act amendments. And this one is an interesting bill because it actually does what I wanted to do from the very beginning last year, and add 2 years ago when the bill was passed, to add a criminal and civil penalty to it. So this one amends the bill and adds that civil penalty in there. And so we'll see what happens in House Appropriations, and then it'll go to the floor. Now, a couple of important deadlines. Thursday is let me just pull up while we're talking about it. I'll pull up the session schedule because I think it's pretty important that we get this right, because this is going to contribute to a lot of the maneuvering that's going to be going on, or that is going on, rather. So on the session schedule, on Thursday, the 27th, that's the last day for bills to be reported out of committee in the second house. So after Thursday, no more committee meetings. They may have committee meetings to talk about interim topics, but there won't be any legislation. And then Friday, the 28th, is the last day for bills to be reported out of committee of the whole in the second house. And that's also the deadline to send bills to the governor for a veto override, which that's not actually correct, because the legislature has 3 days that they could add to the schedule if they wanted to force the governor to either sign or veto a bill. And the way that this works is that if the legislature is in session, the governor has 3 days to either veto or sign or allow a bill to become law without his signature. If the legislature is no longer in session, and that is that they've adjourned, sign and die, and they're out of there, then the governor has 15 days to deal with a piece of legislation. So there's important bills. The supplemental budget is one of those, which that's more important to the governor than anything really, though we did make some significant changes to the bill. The House reduced the governor's Go Green Fund by $100 million. Interestingly enough, the uber super conservative Senate gave the governor back $100 million. So there's that one. There's a couple of gun bills. The gun-free zones bill is already on the governor's desk, so the clock is ticking on that one. There'll be the Second Amendment Protection Act with amendments. That's a good one, and there's several others. So anyway, the deadlines are approaching, and that kind of means that there's going to be a lot of movement in the Wyoming legislature. So it's an interesting time to be in Cheyenne. But let's get to the news here, and we'll start with the I'm pretty sure it's the top story on the cow pie, but it's the new trigger bill would ban abortion if Wyoming's earlier ban is rejected in court. And I don't know. I mean, you have to have your head under, in a hole or underneath a rock to not know the drama that's been surrounding all of these abortion bills in Wyoming. I mean, it's very clear that, the House of Representatives and the Senate definitely want to ban abortion. There's been a couple of different bills that have moved through and passed and been signed by the governor over the last couple of years. And the three of them, the most recent three, they're tied up in court. Now, of course, it was Melissa Owens that said that abortion is health care, though the case had nothing to do with that. I mean, yeah, it had to do with abortion, but the question wasn't whether or not abortion is health care. Melissa Owens, a district court judge in Cheyenne or in Jackson, made that decision on her own. Talk about judicial activism, a pure and simple example of that. Well, anyway, she said that abortion is health care, and all of those bans are going to the Supreme Court. This one is a little bit different. From Trotsky Wolfson, and I quote, Wyoming's pro-life advocates are already planning a new abortion ban in the state of Wyoming if the Supreme Court strikes down the 2023 ban that the legislature passed. That's the Life is a Human Right Act. The House Labor, Health, and Social Services Committee passed Senate File 125 on Monday, a bill that declares abortion is not health care under Wyoming law. The bill is aimed at banning abortion in Wyoming if the state's current abortion ban is struck down in the court. And the Wyoming Supreme Court is deliberating right now the constitutionality of the Life is a Human Right Act. Senate File 125 would go into effect after the court renders a decision on the case March 12th, or on March 12th of 2026, whichever comes sooner. The committee passed Senate File, let's see here, the vote was 7-1, with only Mike Yin voting against it. Of course he would. He's a radical Democrat. Cheyenne attorney Drake Hill, a representative of the conservative advocacy group Honor Wyoming, which, in a full disclosure, Honor Wyoming is a sponsor of Cowboy state politics, told Cowboy State Daily he believes the bill would make abortion illegal in most circumstances in Wyoming if the state Supreme Court throws out the current law. The only exemptions built into the bill are for pregnancies caused by rape or incest and abortions required to save the life of the mother. Now, let's just talk about those exceptions for a little bit. And let's tackle the last one first, life of the mother. Now, it is true that there are cases of where women die in childbirth still. It's a pretty involved process to have a baby, but with the amount of medical technology we have, that's actually pretty rare. And in those cases, when the life of the mother is at stake, or the life of the baby for that matter, that's not a question of abortion. That's a question of triage. And every doctor that is practicing right now understands what triage is. You assess the situation, you figure out which person that you're able to save fastest, and then you go to work. It's not a question of abortion. It's a question of which life can we save. And so that shouldn't even figure into it, but abortion advocates, they want to include that one all the time because that's the one that is easiest for people to understand. But in reality, it's not really a question of abortion at all. And in my opinion, it shouldn't be included in any of these bills. And the second one, rape or incest, I have a real problem with this because I am against abortion. I think abortion is murder in all cases. And you have to look at this from a different perspective. I think that we've had a couple different elections which, kind of indicated, or at least there's polling that's indicated that in, countrywide, most people are not in favor of or are in favor of having exceptions. So politically, it's very difficult to get an abortion bill through if you ban it entirely. And so, while I absolutely disagree with this, I understand the politics surrounding it. Now, I wasn't happy to hear President Trump come out and say, oh, we have to have all of these exceptions in the law. Here's the one caveat that I really, really liked out of the Life is a Human Right Act, that you could only take advantage of the rape or incest exception if you reported the act to police. So there's no way that you could, 7 months into the pregnancy say, oh, well, this is a product of rape, and then, have that exception apply. That wouldn't work under the Life is a Human Right Act. You have to report the rape. And that's for two reasons. One, we want to catch the guy that did it. And two, we want to try to prevent it from happening again. Take that guy off the street. That's the whole point. But if you're, and none of this is easy scenarios to go through. But, in my opinion, Abortion is murder, always has been, and we shouldn't even call it abortion. We should just call it killing babies, because that's what it is. And if you listen to the national media, you can hear abortion advocate after abortion advocate, and there's some real radicals like that guy Ralph Northern in Virginia. He said that, the woman can have the child and then we'll decide what to do. That's murder. That's infanticide right there. But, in Wyoming, we want to try to outlaw abortion. And, it's, as I've said before recently on the program, I've become more a fan of incrementalism. The left has been using incrementalism for a long time. And if you look at how the Democrats have gained power, that's exactly what they do. They just take a little bit at a time so you don't notice your liberties slipping away. And so I don't see any reason why the right can't do that as well. And a good example of that, and one that the Senate screwed up monumentally, was House Bill 234. House Bill 234, and I know, and I'll bring these both together here in just a second. House Bill 234 would have banned credit card companies from tracking your gun purchases. Well, last year, we had the same bill. It was sponsored by Dan Larson, but the bill said that the Attorney General may investigate a tracking of a gun purchase, and that the Attorney General may pursue a court order. So, in other words, the Attorney General doesn't have to do anything. Secondly, there wasn't a penalty in the bill. And though conservatives in the House tried repeatedly to get a penalty put on that bill, we were unsuccessful. So the thinking was, all right, well, we'll just take what we can get here. We've already got a law that says that this practice is outlawed, even though there's no penalty, and it doesn't require the Attorney General to do anything. And then we'll come back this year and we'll finish it off. That was House Bill 234. And the Senate did not make a single amendment to the bill. It went through committee of the whole, went through second reading, and then they killed it on third reading. And there's really no reason for that, because the major thing that 234 did is it changed that the Attorney General may investigate into the Attorney General shall investigate, shall produce, or shall pursue a court order, and there was a penalty attached to it. But the Senate killed that one outright. My point is that I'm okay with incrementalism in some cases, and in some abortion laws, we probably have to do that. Let's go back to the Cowboy. And I quote, Hill said he was involved in discussions with various pro-life groups that helped draft the legislation with Senator Sherry Steinmetz. And she said that she helped draft some of the bill. Typically a more behind-the-scenes player in Wyoming politics, Hill is one of the early leaders in Honor Wyoming. Oh, okay, well, let's skip there. There needed to be legal clarity. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. This is the part that I wanted to get to. Big changes on the bill. On Monday, a significant amendment was added to the bill that was presented by the bill's sponsor. That's Senator Steinmetz. We're very grateful to Senator Sherry Steinmetz for offering this amendment and carrying the process forward. The 3-page amendment specifically clarifies that an unborn fetus is protected under law, and the definition of words like pregnant and abortion, and that abortions are not health care. The abortions are considered health care. Okay, so here's where Trotsky is going off the rails here. He said that abortions are considered health care under the Wyoming Constitution is the main legal question. Okay, so I guess he's right. It is the main question in the legal challenge on the current ban, but the larger question is the ban itself. What Melissa Owens did to outlaw to hold up the Life as a Human Right Act is that she said abortion is health care. So it's the method to overturn the law. It's not what the law itself says. Let's see. The only no vote was Yin, and it's interesting his comment. Listen to this, and then we'll talk about this. Quote: "It looks more like cluttering and reiteration of the legislature's effort to infringe on the judicial branch's role of interpreting the Constitution." Let's see here. I understand that we want to stop living and breathing Wyoming women from having decision-making authority over their own bodies, but the legislature can't erase a constitutional right by redefining constitutional terms. That's why we have the separation of powers. Well, that's not exactly true, because if you look at Article 1, Section 38 in the Wyoming Constitution, it clearly says that the legislature can define what that amendment means. And I mean, it's in no uncertain terms. Leftists, they always like to point to the first part of Article 1, Section 38, that you have the right to make your own health care decisions, but they completely ignore the second part of that law, where that the legislature determines what is constitutional and what is not. I mean, it was a brilliant stroke to put that in the amendment. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue. And we're going to talk about solar panels and net metering. One more thing the Senate has screwed up. Back in a minute. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, information, and entertainment than right here on the Independence Network. Now, we're making a few changes, moving a couple things around, out with the old and in with the new, and that whole spiel. Of course, you could listen to my program, The Ramble Room with Ken Pendergraft, Locked and Loaded with the good Representative Tony Locke from Casper. There's a whole bunch more coming on the Independence Network. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Welcome back to the program, my friends. This is Cowboy State Politics Live. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. I'll go ahead and leave the phone lines open for the entire program. You know, this whole break that I take from Friday all the way to Tuesday just seems too long. And my friends, I got to tell you, you would not believe how much I miss you guys. And it seems like I can't do enough programs. So anyway, back to the program. And before the break, we were talking about this abortion ban, House Senate File 125, which is a trigger bill that if the Life is a Human Right Act ends up being overturned by the Wyoming Supreme Court, well, then this one will kick in. I wasn't a favor of trigger bills when the first one came out. I really just thought, hey, let's just outlaw abortion right now. Well, at the time, Roe v. Wade hadn't been overturned yet, and then the Supreme Court overturned it, and boom, the trigger bill kicked in. And then the lawsuits happened. And then we passed the Life is a Human Right Act, and they overturned that one. And then the abortifacients bill, and then Melissa Owens, and that one's back in court. And, so it was a big mess. But one thing I wanted to point out to you is that liberals, they always talk about the first part of Article 1, Section 38. And they always forget about subsection C. So I guess it's the third part of it. Let me just read this to you. The legislature may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on the rights granted under this section to protect the health and general welfare of the people or to accomplish the other purposes set forth in the Wyoming Constitution. So it is the legislature that determines what is healthcare and what is not healthcare. And the big mistake that Melissa Owens made is she absolutely ignored subsection C. So I don't see there's any way how the Wyoming Supreme Court could look at this and interpret it in any way other than, hey, it's up to the legislature to say what is healthcare and what is not. But, you know, the Wyoming Supreme Court, they're not the most conservative group of people. So, yeah, I mean, that one, who knows what's going to happen there. We all need to pray about it because, you know, we're in America, we've killed 64 million babies. Think about that. 64 million babies have died at our hands. And if you don't think that we're not going to pay for that at some point, you are wrong, my friends. And so any attempt that we can make to save the life of a little baby, we should do that. Ranchers were in favor of backing this solar power bill. But the Senate, once again, has watered down what was a good bill. And this is a piece from Wildpile, and I quote, "Family agricultural operations are, quote, dealing with these monopolistic utilities. They're monopolies, Warnock said. They have tremendous power." He's talking about the energy companies. "It's their way or the highway. There's no negotiating with them." Now, Warnock and others in agriculture said they want to invest in solar technology to make ends meet, and they found support among conservation groups and even town officials who want to do the same thing. A measure to achieve that goal weathered skepticism to clear first the House and then a Senate committee. But in surmounting these hurdles, the legislation has morphed into something that proponents say could do more harm than good. House Bill 183, net metering amendments, would expand the size of solar installations that qualify for net metering. And net metering is reimbursement from utility companies for excess produced power, from 25 kilowatts of self-generation to 200 kilowatts. Expanding the qualification, proponents say, would bring the benefits of net metering beyond homes to ranching operations, churches, and potentially even schools and municipal facilities. The bill cleared the Senate Minerals and Business and Economic Development Committee on February 18th, but not before it was significantly altered. Lawmakers amended the bill in a way that appears to expose all net metering customers to as yet undefined new fees, jeopardizing its support among agricultural communities and municipalities. Cheyenne Republican Senator Slithers, Tara Nethercott, who brought the amendment, and listen to this next phrase, said it was a condition of her support for the bill, and it's based on a perception that net metering customers might not pay a fair share of the utility system's cost necessary to keep them connected to the grid. Quote, "I understand the need for alternative sources of energy because sometimes those energy demands can't be met," Slithers said, "but we have to continue to pay into the grid." Some net metering proponents consider that measure a poison pill. Of course it's a poison pill. Because if you're saying that people that produce energy and are just connected to the grid have to pay outrageous fees, what do you think those fees are going to end up being? The whole reason why net metering exists is so that the energy producers like Rocky Mountain Power and others can't just suck off of the efforts of individual citizens, that they actually have to pay for the power that's put back in the grid. And it only makes sense. Senator Slithers' amendment would allow energy companies to assess whatever fees they want. It's just another example of what we were told was the uber-duber conservative Senate watering down another good bill. The truth is, my friends, it is not conservatives that are in charge of the Wyoming Senate. And I mean, on the program, I've told you about several different examples of where they've watered down bills. And I mean, I think that this week, we're just going to have to keep a close eye on what the Senate does, because there's a lot of good conservative legislation that came out of the House. Most of the 5 and dime plan hasn't even cleared the Senate yet. So we're going to have to see what happens in the Senate. Hopefully they come to their conservative senses and they just pass a lot of this stuff. But my guess is probably going to water down a few things, and I'll keep you posted on that. Well, let's go ahead and take our bottom of the hour break. And when we come back, I've got another interesting piece. And this one is about electing UW the board of trustees for the University of Wyoming. I think it's a fascinating, fantastic idea. But the uber-duber super conservative education committee in the Senate, well, they disagreed. So we'll talk about that when we come back. There's a lot of reasons why you want to do that, and some of them boil down to the work that I've done on this program. I'll remind you when we come back. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. The program is only going to continue to expand. Nothing can stop this machine, my friends. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics on the podcast, on YouTube, Facebook, X, on Rumble. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. And I mean, who wouldn't want that? Oh, that's right. That's right. The liberals don't want that. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Tuesday morning, and I'm excited to be back with you. Well, let's go to another piece in the cow pie, and this one is entitled, Senate Committee Rejects Proposal to Make UW Trustees Elected and Not Appointed. Now, this is an issue that's been going back and forth in the legislature for, several years. And the whole reason is we have a land-grant university that really has been straying a long ways away from their mission. That's why we've got a lot of legislation last year, this year, to try to strip all of the DEI influences out of the University of Wyoming and get them to focus on their core mission, and that is educating kids and supporting agriculture in the state. That's why the university was started in the very first place. But we're so far away from that, it's not even funny. And a perfect example of that is an undercover investigation I did a couple of years ago into drag queen trainings. And I mean, you can't even make this stuff up, that were being held at the University of Wyoming and that were paid for by your tax dollars through the Office of Multicultural, now defunct office, whatever they say it is, of multicultural affairs and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I sent an undercover operative into the event and recorded the whole thing. And holy crap, were there a lot of things that happened during that thing that are so far away from what a university needs to be doing that, I mean, it was absolutely shocking. Well, the press didn't really pay any attention to the investigation, but it did have a big impact on the University of Wyoming Board of Trustees. And the reason I know that is our current representative, Harriet Hageman, was involved in those discussions. And I mean, really, the discussions boiled down to, what the heck are you doing here? Training drag queens? Are you absolutely out of your minds? And so the legislature's response to that was to say, well, maybe we can elect some of the Board of Trustees members. Now, let's go to the article first, and then we'll talk about it. And I quote, it looks like that the trustees of the University of Wyoming will continue to be appointed by the governor and not elected through public education. On Monday, the Senate Education Committee passed a recommendation of, quote, do not pass to the House Bill 148, a bill that would make the trustee positions at the university publicly elected. The bill will technically still advance to the Senate for consideration, but its chances of being heard on the floor are pretty much next to nothing now. Senate Education Committee Chairwoman Wendy Schuler, another not-so-conservative person that was put in charge of a Senate committee, yeah, we were all told that they were conservatives. They're not. Explained to Cowboy State Daily that a do not pass recommendation solely comes into play when a committee finds a bill to be unconstitutional. A normal committee rejection, for the most part, prevents a bill from advancing any further. The recommendation was made on a 3-2 vote. Schuler and Charlie Scott and Chris Rothfuss of the Ivory Tower voted for it, while Evie Brennan and Jared Olson voted against it, expressing their desire that the committee pass the bill. So why is it needed? Representative Rachel Rodriguez-Williams of Cody, the chairman of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, said constituents around her entire district have expressed a desire for the trustee elections to be publicly elected. Currently, the board has 12 voting members who are all appointed by the governor. House Bill 148 would expand the number of voting trustees to 14, with only 7 appointed by the governor and 7 publicly elected. The trustees' current representation for different geographic regions throughout the state would continue under the bill. Now, the interesting part here is that the Wyoming Constitution lays out how the Board of Trustees is to be set up, and they're all appointed by the governor. In fact, the Wyoming Constitution says the governor shall appoint no less than 7 of the Board of Trustees. And let's see here. The way Trotsky puts it in his article is the question of constitutionality centered around Article 7, Section 17 of the Wyoming Constitution, which states that the UW Trustee Board has not less than 7 members to be appointed by the governor. So, in theory, you could set up the number of trustees to be 14, let the governor appoint 7 of them, as the Constitution says, and make the other 7 publicly elected. Makes perfect sense to me because it is a public university, and you would think that Wyoming citizens should have a say in what goes on at the university. But thanks to Wendy Schuler and Charlie Scott, that one's going nowhere. Thanks, guys, for being uber and very, very conservative that you're not. And, you know, there's a reason why one of Charlie Scott's nicknames, and I got to explain this because, you know, it's a little confusing, but sometimes Charlie Scott acts like Comrade Scott. Other times, he's fantastic. Usually when it comes to education, he's pretty good. Or when it comes to Medicaid expansion, he hates that bill and makes sure that it dies every single time. But evidently on this one, they really missed the boat, and it's just another example of how the Senate is not under the control of conservatives, nor was it from the very beginning. We're just going to have to keep running this bill because Wyoming citizens absolutely should have a say in how their university is governed. I mean, it's our tax dollars that are paying for it. And I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't have a say in it. And so anyway, I mean, and here's the other part. You know, the legislature is often accused of trying to dictate how the university educates kids. Well, to some degree, they're correct because there's some things you just don't need tax dollars to be paying for. DEI is one of those. And that's another interesting discussion because, you know, in Wyoming, we're the equality state. And you can go to any museum in the state of Wyoming and you'll find pictures of white ranches that have black ranch hands. You'll find pictures of black ranches with white cow ranch hands. You'll find Basque ranches that have all sorts of different people working on them. So the truth is, in Wyoming, we don't really give a crap what color your skin is or what your name is. I mean, it's all about what you could do. But all of these DEI programs, they run in the face of that, and they say that, depending on what your essential characteristics are, whether you're black or white or man or woman or, and whatever 47 other genders people at the university think we have. But none of that has anything to do with your aptitude. And we need to get back to a system of merit that you are, that it's the fruits of your labor that determine your success in the world. And it doesn't have anything to do with what you look like or what your name is or if you're a man or woman. We need to get away from all of this, reductionism and this diversity, equity, and inclusion, and instead focus on merit. And thank God President Trump has the same vision of, getting back to a society of, you get what you deserve and you get what you work hard for. And it doesn't have anything to do with you being a DEI hire. And I mean, let's be honest, nobody would get on a plane if you knew the pilot was just hired because of their skin color. You wouldn't do that. I mean, that's insanity. But I mean, that's how crazy a lot of these folks at the university and other places, for that matter, it's not just the University of Wyoming, are wanting to focus on, essential characteristics, DEI and all that. We got to get away from that. And by the way, I've got an interesting article. Maybe we'll get to it. Here we go. Let's just do it now. So I haven't tortured you guys with anything from The View for quite a while. But ABC's Sunny Houston, I think that's her name, she said that being anti-woke is ungodly and that it's not Christian if you're not woke. And I quote from Breitbart News. ABC News legal analyst Sunny Houston declared Thursday on ABC's The View that being anti-woke means you don't care about your fellow neighbor and that's ungodly. Co-host Whoopi Goldberg said, quote, award season always gets a little political, but last night's Screen Actors Guild Award, when the actress and longtime activist America-hating Jane Fonda accepted her Lifetime Achievement Award, she had something to say. Take a look. Now, if you have an award show that has traitor Jane Fonda receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, you should just turn the channel right there. That is the very first reason why you shouldn't pay any attention to it and why whomever is putting on this award show is absolutely not in tune with American citizens. But here's what Sunny Houston said on The View. Listen to this.
And so it angers me when people are like, this woke stuff has got to go. That's telling me that you don't care about my lived experience. You don't care about the oppression of the LGBTQ community. You don't care about the oppression of the disabled. You don't care about the oppression of immigrants. You don't care about your fellow neighbor. And that is ungodly. That is not Christian. So,
yeah. Listen to the applause. Well, no, it's not that we don't care about people. It's not we don't care about what happened to them. But what happened to your ancestors 150 years ago has nothing to do with who you are today. And so when folks like Sunny Houston try to inject what they call systemic racism into a system that is not systemically racist, it's another example of that the things that you get or the things that you're awarded with have nothing to do with your aptitude. It's just, who your ancestors were and your essential characteristics. But the Bible clearly says that, maybe you get the fruits of your labor and that nobody else is entitled to the fruits of your labor. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. But there's a reason why programs like The View, and I think I've got another one here in the stack of stuff, that PMS NBC, of all people, is starting to fire people. And, that's because nobody watches them, because America has moved past all of this woke ideology, and we're done with it. We're ready to... American citizens very clearly voted for President Trump. It's the first time that a Republican won the popular vote in a really long time. I think that's a clear signal that we're done with all the leftist crap that we've been putting up with for the past 4 years. And we're ready to move on to something where we that people, actually support, and we're not trampled on by administration. Let's get back to merit, my friends. Let's do away with all this diversity, equity, inclusion. None of it is worth anything. We'll finish up the program in just a second. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way.
Welcome back to the program, my friends. Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm your host, David Iverson, Wyoming's conservative voice. In a new segment that we should keep going, entitled Revelations of the Blatantly Obvious, Hamas official says that he regrets October 7th and he wouldn't have supported it had he known the outcome. No kidding. From Breitbart, and I quote, a senior Hamas official told the New York Times last week that he would not have supported the October 7th terror attack against Israel if he would have known the outcome, the utter destruction of Hamas and the devastation of Gaza. According to the Times on Monday, and I quote, Musa Abba Marzouk, a Qatar-based head of Hamas's foreign relations office, said in an interview with the New York Times that he would not have supported the attack if he had known the havoc it would wreak on Gaza. Knowing the consequences, he said, would have made it impossible for him to back the assault. No kidding. To think that Israel wasn't going to respond to the, I don't even know how many rockets were fired into Israel. But to think that they wouldn't respond is pretty naive. But, they've been pretty much able to operate with immunity for a really long time, so maybe they stupidly thought that Israel wouldn't respond. Now, Mr. Abu Marzouk said that Hamas's survival in the war against Israel was itself kind of a victory. He also likened Hamas to an average person fighting Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight boxing champion. Oh, God, I can't even read any more of this. Hamas needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. They're a terrorist organization, and I'm totally in favor of Donald Trump turning Gaza into a resort town. I think that's an excellent idea. Let's see here. What else do we have in the... I don't want to talk about the View again. Oh, I know what we haven't talked about. Dan Bongino being appointed to be the deputy director of the FBI. This is the worst nightmare of the left, my friends. Not only is Kash Patel the director of the FBI and now the interim director of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. By the way, we don't need an interim director of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. We need to abolish that agency entirely. They have grown way outside of their mandate, and really the only reason why they exist right now is to persecute otherwise law-abiding Americans, and in some cases prosecute people who are law-abiding by setting them up. The ATF has a long history of killing people that really didn't break the law, and they wouldn't have broken the law had it not been for the ATF. But in this case, Trump has revealed that Dan Bongino has been picked to be the deputy director of the FBI. And I quote, President Donald Trump announced that the Secret Service veteran Dan Bongino has been picked to serve as the deputy director. In a post on Truth Social, Trump praised Bongino as a highly respected special agent with the United States Secret Service, adding that he is now one of the most successful podcasters in the nation. That's absolutely true. Great news for law enforcement and American justice, Trump wrote in his post. Dan Bongino, a man of incredible love and passion for our country, has just been named the next deputy director of the FBI by a man who will be the best director ever, Kash Patel. Dan has a master's degree in psychology from City University in New York and an MBA from Penn State, Trump added. He was a member of the New York Police Department, a highly respected special agent with the Secret Service, and is now one of the... let's hear. Trump added that with Bongino working with Kash Patel, who has recently been confirmed to lead the FBI and sworn in, the Attorney General Pam Bondi, fairness, justice, law, and order will be brought back to America, and quickly. Thank you, Mr. President, Attorney General Bondi and Director Patel, Bongino wrote in a post on X. In an interview with Breitbart News in 2023, Bongino weighed in on cocaine that had been discovered in the West Wing of the White House, stating that, quote, there is simply no way the Secret Service did not know who it belonged to. Bongino added at the time that the government was so messed up and so corrupt right now. Quote, argue all you want about the deep state being a conspiracy theory or whatever. That's all bullcrap. It's real, Bongino said. We've already seen corruption in the intel community, the FBI. And are we going to find out? The answer is, I don't know. I can't predict the future, but let me tell you this. I'm just looking in the camera and begging the Secret Service leadership now. Just don't do to America what the FBI did. Well, with Kash Patel at the head of the FBI and Dan Bongino as his deputy director, I would say that I think things are going to be turned around and rather quickly. And despite what all of the liberals have said, that Trump's tariffs are actually producing investment in our country. It seems to me that when you put a businessman in charge, he may actually know what he's doing. And, this whole tariff thing, it worked the first time. I don't know why it wouldn't work the second time. Well, Apple has pledged to invest $500 billion in the United States. Apple has announced plans to invest $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years and hire 20,000 new workers as the company seeks relief from President Donald Trump's tariffs on goods imported from China. Bloomberg reports that in a move to bolster its domestic presence and potentially avoid hefty tariffs, Apple has committed to investing $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. The tech giant also pledged to create, as part of the investment plan, Apple will begin producing AI servers at a new manufacturing facility in Houston, Texas. The company also intends to establish a supplier academy in Michigan and increase spending with its existing U.S. suppliers. The $500 billion investment and job creation targets surpass Apple's previous commitment made in 2021 to invest $430 billion locally over a 5-year period. President Trump, who has threatened to impose an additional 10% tariff on items imported from China, where Apple manufactures the majority of its products, implied that the iPhone maker is investing locally to avoid the tariffs. Maybe, possibly, that's the whole reason behind the tariffs. Seems to me that a successful businessman may know how to run the country after all. Well, my friends, we've burned through another busy broadcast hour on the program. If you missed the broadcast, don't forget about the additional podcast stream that I've set up where you can listen to all of the episodes of Cowboy State Politics Live until your heart's content. We'll talk again tomorrow during the program, and we'll also have a podcast episode. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, from the depths of the Middle Swamp, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow.